Okay, everyone, we are going to get started. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Judy Browse, and I'm the Executive Director of NAAEE, and we are thrilled that you are here. Today, it's all about systems thinking. What do we need to know and think about with systems thinking and environmental education? And I can just see from your introductions, we have a real mixed audience, and our wonderful presenters are going to talk about systems thinking that can help us all that are working in the field. And I'll introduce them more fully in a minute, but we have Nicole and Gitanjali here. We couldn't have two better people talking about systems thinking. And if you've been to an NAAE conference before, you've seen Gitanjali present, Nicole, they're both fantastic. And thank you all of you who sent in questions. It really helps us get a sense of what you're thinking, what your questions are, and we want you to continue that in the chat as you have questions. If you've never been to an NAAEE webinar, we are always trying to bring new ideas, thinking, insights from our field and beyond to help us all learn more and keep on the cutting edge of what is happening in the world. As you know, it's a tumultuous time and it's a changing landscape. And thanks to all our affiliate partners who are all fantastic. If you don't know your affiliate in your state or province, just look them up on our website and join. You can find out more what's going on in your state, region, or province. Thanks for being part of this. And a big thank you to US EPA and E360 Plus for helping to support the webinar series that we are doing now. It allows us to share such great ideas and speakers with everyone. So for those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, we know there are a lot of different platforms. You can type your questions in the chat. We also have closed captioning, and we will be recording this, including the chat, so you'll get everything after the webinar. So don't worry about taking a million notes. You'll get this afterward. And if you see on your toolbar, it'll show you where the chat is, it'll show you where the closed captions are. We do have different languages that you can select. There are 31 options, so hopefully your language is there if English is not your first language. And I want to give a big thank you to Anne, who is our Director of Leadership, Conservation, and International Programs. She is helping us with the webinar and helps us with so many things, including running our fellowship and leadership programs and so many other things. So Anne, thank you so much for your help on the webinar series. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. We are super lucky to not only be talking about systems thinking, but working with two people who do a lot of thinking about systems thinking. And that's what we need to find out more about how it can help all of us that are in the field of environmental ed. And first, Nicole is the executive director of Compass Education. She's an amazing storyteller. She's been a real advocate for systems thinking in education and what that actually looks like. And she has more than 2 decades of thinking about kind of social impact working between education and the environment. And she has worked with organizations and schools around the world to understand how do we deal with the complexity that we're dealing with. So Nicole, we are thrilled to have you. And we also have Gitanjali, who has more than 15 years of experience, including 12 years the education manager at Compass Education. You have worked with schools and organizations all around the world, looking at how do we foster positive social and environmental experiences that lead to impact. So can't wait to hear more about how do we do thoughtful learning design that can inspire this action. And my favorite thing in your bio is you are a Sea Change Fellow and you have been amazing. So I am going to turn it over to the two of you. Thanks for being here, and we're excited about your presentation.
Thank you so much, Judy. It's always such a joy to get to do anything with NAAEE and especially to follow Judy's fun slides and pictures. So hi, everyone. My name is Gitanjali Paul, and as Judy mentioned, I am very happy to be part of the NAAEE community, and today with my co-presenter, Nicole, sharing with you some of our insights and ideas that you can use to help move the people you work with from problems to possibilities as we explore the power of systems thinking for environmental educators. So, as we get started today, just a little bit more about who we are and especially Compass Education, who we both are working with, and Nicole is the executive director of. Compass Education is this global movement of educators who believe that a flourishing, sustainable world begins with our students and schools. And I had the joy of beginning to work with Compass, gosh, a dozen years ago when I was teaching high school social studies living in the Philippines. And I really wanted to help my students who are coming from all over the world dig into local systemic challenges in a way that kept them from making assumptions, helped them be really observant and thinking about what was going on. And I realized that every single issue had an environmental component and nature was essential. And that's how I transitioned into environmental education, not realizing it at first, but slowly just by caring about the world and caring about what my students cared about, realizing everything comes back to nature. And so that's part of what Compass Ed is all about. And it uses systems thinking as a nonprofit to support educators around the world in integrating systems thinking for sustainability into our curriculum and schools and programming. And as you can see, it works all around the world. And we're really thrilled that this year we estimate our work has now reached 1 million students. So, Compass Education is really at the heart of what we're going to share in terms of framing for the tools today about systems thinking. And we're also going to share a few insights on learning design, which is part of what I get to work on with Nicole, but also more generally through my organization that is all about designing learning for systems change. But today, let's get into it. So, what we're really going to focus on with you all today is this kind of mental and practical shift. So, we can see that you're all coming from very different backgrounds. There are some people coming from classrooms and nature centers, community programs, outdoor ed, universities, all over the country and the world. But a lot of us share similar goals in that we want to be working with communities and educating them to foster a love of the environment, environmental sustainability, regeneration, sustainable mindsets and habits. And to do that, part of our role as environmental educators is to help our community members understand the problems that we face so we can address them and cultivate that more just sustainable world we want to create. But a key thing to remember is that understanding problems is not the same as being equipped to address them. And that's where we want to come in today. We're going to explore how we can help our learners, whatever age we're working with or whatever context we're working in, how we can help them shift from understanding problems to being not just aware, but have agency to address those problems and create positive change.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. Thank you, Judy, for that kind introduction and for your help, and Gitanjali for just always being amazing. I'm excited to be here with you. And really quickly, I came to this work out of the nonprofit sector. I had been working sort of the crossroads of education, environment, community work. And then my kids, who grew up in a rural community in Mexico, I enrolled them in the American school, thinking that I needed them to really be prepared for university in the US and what that might look like. And really quickly, I realized that although this was the best school around and it was the school that was going to prepare them for standardized tests and for getting into college, they weren't doing anything I care deeply about. And as I began to look at why, I recognized, oh, these are good educators and they care deeply about the world. It isn't that they don't care, and it's not that my own kids don't care or the other kids don't care. It's that the system suggests that we need to be teaching in a certain way, right? We need to be preparing students for certain kinds of outcomes and other outcomes, things that I might consider critical, like being able to be involved in the community and being able to do work for the environment, especially living in a beautiful tourist area. Those were secondary or tertiary, right? Those were left for the after school. And it became really evident this is a bigger challenge than simply one I can address. And really, it's a systems challenge of the way that we have designed education. And that became my sort of introduction into what's happening. And if I want to create change in this education system, whether it's my school or the bigger one, where and how can I have impact? And I think we see these things all the time. And as adults, we see and talk about systems change, right? We talk about systemic racism. We talk about social injustice. We all acknowledge those are systems challenges. And yet we, even as adults, aren't quite sure how to do systems thinking. We definitely don't teach it. Um, and we often think of it in just very simplistic ways of, well, if you work with the government system and the private sector and the corporate sector, then you're doing systems practice. And the reality is we need to really change the way we're thinking about the world if we're going to accomplish systems change. And that starts for me in schools. And that became sort of my passion. But what I think is really exciting today, and this wasn't the case even maybe 5 or 10 years ago, is that these, and Gitanjali, if you can change the slide, that'd be great, is that the guidelines that are being put into the world today are acknowledging this, right? So the greening curriculum guidance, which comes out of UNESCO, which Compass has been part of forming, name systems thinking as a critical competency and practice for sustainable outcomes. It's also named within the NAAE. It's named within this work and reports that are being done by Project Everyone and other aligned groups with international sort of best practices in sustainability education. And so now that we're seeing it, we have to really start to think about how are we going to use this and why do we think in systems? Right? Why does systems thinking help us do not just what we're trying to do in environmental education, but what we're trying to do as educators, right? Which is really preparing our students to think deeply about what's happening and to be, as Gitanjali mentioned, in a role where they can identify their own agency in that system and in the ways that they want to change. So we believe strongly that, systems thinking isn't just about environmental education. It's in fact about everything we do in school, and it makes education practice, whether it's in school or out of school or in our corporations and organizations, it makes our practice and our ability to have impact so much stronger. All right, so we have 3 specific takeaways for you. And I think it's really important, right, to know what you're coming into in this webinar. We want you to understand that every problem lives inside a system, and to see it and understand it that way. We want to share a tool with you. There's many tools. We're going to share one to help you navigate and help your students or your learners navigate complex problems. And we're going to sort of think about learning design and how that attributes to the outcomes that you want to see. And so I'd love to sort of hear from you in the chat, if you want to, about environmental issues that you're working on. Just give us sort of an idea of environmental issues that you're using with your learners, that you're concerned about, that you're working on. So we have a little bit of perspective of who's in the room and what they're working on. Go ahead and add that in there. All right, I see climate change, pollinators, biodiversity loss, civic engagement, road ecology, zero waste. I love the diversity, right? Pollution, composting, citizen science, phone recycling. Oh, that's great. Lead in water, recruiting youth, join climate action, nature deficit disorder. I've never heard that, but it's lovely. Equity, reducing single-use plastic, inequitable access to the outdoors. Amazing. And I love, Marcelo, so nice to see you. Angie says all of them. Good. We've got a rock star educator in the room. All right. Thank you all for sharing some of that and giving us some ideas. We'll try to sort of blend that in the way that we're talking about things today. And I'll hand it over to Gitanjali to take you into takeaway number 1.
Yeah, it's great to see the range of issues that we all are working on. And it really is this perfect entry point to acknowledging that every single issue we want to focus on as environmental educators that is tied to a problem is living within a greater system. So as we're thinking about the work that we do, all of us know that environmental issues aren't isolated topics. We know that they're the outcomes of systems. Things like pollution, food systems, animal conservation, urban environmental planning, water quality, joy in nature, all of these things, everything we mentioned in the chat is connected to deeper systems. So the question is, how do we engage people with these topics to actually address the problems and not just understand what's going on? So to get into this, let's take a look at this picture and do an exercise that many of you have probably done before. Here's an image. In the chat, I'd like you to drop one word. What does this photo bring up for you? Anything this photo brings up for you? Fear, ugh, pollution. No. Sadness. Yeah, I'm seeing some emotions. A lot of people are having an emotional response, recognizing perhaps some hopelessness, some yeah, that's a good one right there. Kind of that feeling, maybe even in your body. I'm seeing a couple of more like thinking things about, oh, this is preventable, or it's about plastic pollution, familiar. Yeah, so I mean, we can see in this chat that it elicits this emotional response, sadness, anger, maybe even guilt. It tells a familiar story. Many of us have heard this story of how people litter, plastic reaches the ocean, wildlife suffers. And when we show learners a photo like this or engage them with an experience that elicits an emotional response, it gets them thinking. They might feel some compassion and they want to do something, which is really great. We want that. But is that all that we want? As we're thinking about the kinds of actions we want them to take, it's really important to think about what is their understanding of what's happening that empowers them to take action. So this diagram I'm showing now reflects that kind of common story that we might hear of why turtles end up eating plastic bags. Someone litters and their trash, in this case a plastic bag, ends up in the ocean, which is negatively impacting the turtle who eats it when they mistake it for a jellyfish. If someone learns this through their work with us, they understand that there is an issue and they can even make a personal connection through emotion or thinking to that issue and want to make a change. But if we aren't careful and we just teach about plastic pollution with this linear story, we've run the risk that the learners we're working with are going to see the harm without actually understanding what's generating it. And while it does empower them to make an individual change, like I'm going to recycle more or use fewer plastic bags, it's not doing something deeper and more impactful that's systemic. It locates the problem in individual action and leaves that bigger picture invisible. And it can actually increase feelings of helplessness or disenfranchisement, which is the opposite of what most of us want. And, not just for marine plastic pollution, this can happen with a lot of environmental issues like climate change or water pollution, biodiversity loss, et cetera. We can focus so much on helping people understand the topic or the issue, but it might not be a whole systemic issue, and it can leave them with this understanding that there's such a limited entry point for taking action. In reality, the topic is just the starting point. It's just the surface level understanding of what's happening and what's possible. When we teach with systems, we go beyond the surface level to help give learners more of a map for what they can do to make a difference. So before we dive more into this, just what exactly is systems thinking? Judy actually had this quote up as we were sitting in today to get started for the webinar, because it's a fantastic quote to illustrate what systems thinking is. As environmental educators, we mostly are aware of systems in nature, but systems thinking is one of those many things that we can observe in nature and learn from to apply to our greater world. As Peter Senge describes here, it's about having this more holistic view of what's going on, specifically trying to understand the interrelationships between the parts of our world and remembering life's not about a Polaroid picture, it's about change over time. So applied to our education work, it's how are we helping our learners to see relationships, feedback, root causes, and all the things that are leading to the outcomes that are the problems we're concerned about. And when we engage our learners in this, we're helping to shift them just from a viewer of problems to an analyst who's not just thinking, here's a problem. They're thinking, here's how a problem works, what's driving it, and what change might be possible. So what does this look like in practice? Well, this is a diagram to get us thinking about this. A topic-based framing, like what I showed you before, is kind of showing, plastic pollution is harming ocean ecosystems. But this more systemic-based framing is asking what economic policies, production incentives, maybe laws and regulatory gaps, individual consumption patterns, group patterns. What are they doing? What would have to shift? And where does that change have to occur in order for the outcome to be different? And you don't need a PhD or a really complicated, level of understanding of being an academic to do a systems map like this. Even a simple 2 or 3-step causal map can help learners see connections and find more opportunities to get involved and open up more ways for them to intervene and make a difference. So in a moment, as Nicole said, that's what we're going to really teach you and focus on today, a tool for helping to map this complexity. But before we get into that, a quick pause for another question to all of you in the chat. I am very curious if you can, at this point, think about a topic that you are teaching, and if there's a root cause or underlying relationship that you realize the learners you work with often miss. Just throw it in the chat. Is there something that you notice when you're working with people, they miss this root cause or they miss this relationship that's really key for the topics that you're trying to address? Colonialism. Yeah. Poverty, racism, traditional knowledge systems, yeah, versus Western knowledge systems, consumption trends, ecosystem services like from forests, access. I find it interesting that a lot of these coming up are social and economic systems that are interacting with natural systems, plastic pollution, yeah. So you can see here that there's a lot of these underlying systems that we know are part of it, but then pause and think, is this something that you engage your learners with as you're thinking about how they can take action on your issue? Let's think a little bit more about how you can do this going into takeaway 2.
Absolutely. So it's always good to have tools, right? All of us are educators in the world and we have tools in our toolbox, and the more tools you can pull out in the moment most needed, the more helpful it is. And so I hope to be introducing to you one of my very favorite tools. And this tool is called the Sustainability Compass. And the compass, Gitanjali, if you don't mind changing the slide. Great. So the compass is this framework, right? It's super simple. It's using the cardinal points, north, east, south, and west, as a way to help us understand the 4 systems conditions that we need for sustainable outcomes, right? So N is for nature, E is for economy, S is for society, and W is for well-being. And we use this tool in order to help, we often say, find as a navigation tool, find a pathway to a more sustainable world. And the tool, it's really important to understand, it comes from some of the best thinkers in the world of systems thinking and sustainability. And particular, many of you have probably heard of Herman Daly. Herman Daly won the Laureate Prize for being sort of he was from the World Bank, he was an economist, and was the first person to put together sort of, the triple bottom line, people, profit, and planet, the Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, and our different forms of capital in one visual space. And it was this triangle. And of course, we can probably all say the world doesn't need another triangle. And to be honest, the triangle suggests a hierarchy. And Donella Meadows, who's considered sort of the mother of systems thinking, and I do want to make a really important clarification. Donella Meadows she wrote the book Limits to Growth. She's often called the mother of systems thinking, but she's really important to understand that systems thinking wasn't invented by Donella Meadows. Systems thinking, in fact, is an indigenous practice that unfortunately got lost in our development of the world. And so Donella Meadows' perception and practice of systems thinking is within this context of academia, of capitalism, and it's a way to support us to understand it in the language that we're currently speaking. And Donella Meadows and Alan Atkinson was one of the original sort of sustainability pioneers in the United States. They're sitting together in a meeting of the Balaton Group, which was the original sustainability global think tank. And they're trying to figure out, how do we make Herman Daly's triangle more actionable, more relatable, and bring it to the world? And Alan had this sort of aha moment, let's turn it into a compass. And so that's what you're seeing here. And Gitanjali, if you can, thank you. And so when we look at the compass, what we're really trying to do is support people to understand that good outcomes for nature, good outcomes for the environment require every system to be considered, right? And so really traditionally, so N reflects nature, and nature is the place where 90% of the world situates the kinds of challenges that we're working on. Climate change and biodiversity and habitat loss, it all sort of sits in nature. And most people, if you say the word sustainability, they're also thinking very similar thoughts, right? But we can't have good outcomes for nature if we don't have a prosperous and vital and equitable economy, right? You can't tell somebody who can't feed their family not to cut down the trees in the rainforest. You can't tell somebody who lives in a food desert that they should support more organics, right? So we need a prosperous, equitable economy for good outcomes for nature. And social is that space of social stability, equity. It's that place that we all come together. It's our education, it's our laws, our governance. And it's critically important that we have stability in those spaces. There's nobody at war today that's thinking, let me do that a little more sustainably, right? And so we need stability to have good outcomes for nature and good outcomes for ourselves. And well-being is this place where we're able to bring in the individual. And we very specifically are speaking about individual well-being. If I'm not okay, I can't do any of the rest of this well. I can't hold down a job. I probably am not going to be contributing to my community, and I'm not taking walks in nature thinking how I can help it. We need to be happy, fulfilled, healthy as individuals. So it's critically important. So this tool, and I'm going to ask you to just sort of dive in with absolute attention because we are going to use these different frameworks as a way. Gitanjali, I think your slides just went. There you go. We're going to go quickly. No problem. All right. So these are the kinds of things we might think about from nature and just think about them quickly. These are all standard things that you're probably familiar with. Nature's probably the easiest one for us as environmental educators. Quick read. We're going to move through to the next one. If you're thinking about economy, you're going to be thinking about these kinds of things, goods and services and market and wages and innovation, reputation and image, right? Lots of times that's one that people are like, why is that there? Well, it's there because if any of us have used social media, we know that reputation and image drives the economy, right? So this is the space where we might think about those kinds of things. And the social space is where we're going to be thinking about things like governance, about education, about diversity and public opinion, about our institutions, about human rights. These are really important practices that contribute towards or against the kinds of outcomes we need. And so we really need to be able to consider that as we're considering the work that we're doing in environmental education. And then ultimately, as we talked about, it's that space of well-being, right? This understanding, again, that we need to have agency over our fulfillment, our happiness, our security, and our safety in order to contribute anywhere else. So think about those 4 frameworks because we're going to just dive into an activity and you're going to use it quickly. And that's the whole point of this. There's a statement here by David Orr, which is sort of one of my favorite ones, right? All education is environmental education, reflecting again the interconnected nature of all of these things and the importance for us to stop siloing our work in the sciences, for example, or stop siloing our work in only specific spaces and beginning to help us, even as educators, to recognize and understand and convey that this work can be done in all ways, all places, and all conversations. And that's the way we're going to bring it into the hands of everyone. And so we're going to, it's all connected. I love seeing that in the chat. You're right. We're all ecological. All right. I'm going to ask you to jump in right now and to use the tool. And so one of the ways, the way that we use this tool is we kind of put the thing that we're thinking about in the center, the topic, the conversation, the item, whatever it is. And then we sort of ask people to unpack it from one of the compass points. So I don't know if you can see that, but in the center is chocolate. one of my favorite things. And chocolate's in the center. And what I want you to do is sort of think about one element of chocolate, an idea or thought that you might have, and what compass point it relates to. So, for example, in my case, I'm going to say well-being in the chat, and then I'm going to say dipping dark chocolate in coffee in the morning starts my day off the right way. That's my well-being. So go ahead and choose a compass point and a way that it relates to chocolate and add that there into the chat. Yeah, economy, all the holidays that focus on buying chocolate as gifts. Nature, harder to grow due to climate change. Ooh, economy, why does chocolate cost so much? Child labor, also an economy. Makes me happy, wellness. You got it. You got it. Economy. Nature made with palm oil requires pollinators. Society, we gather around chocolate in the office. Good use of society. Society, what we accept from companies regarding human rights. Look at the diversity of thinking here, right? It's just chocolate, right? It's that chocolate you buy at the grocery store. And yet, when we unpack it, we can look at it from all sorts of ways. So I want to move on and look at how some first graders are thinking about chocolate. So this is the way we use the compass. Chocolate's in the center. And if you look closely in the red pink stickies, you're going to see the way that kids are unpacking. Now, they probably got chocolate for a holiday gift, and their teacher wanted them to think about it. And so first graders are looking at the complexity in the pink stickies of, chocolate's not healthy for our body, and we're happy when we get chocolate, right? Both are true. Both are true. And they're looking in the blue, in the corner of the blue and the green, and they're thinking, it gets wrapped up. Tempering makes chocolate shiny and delicious, but that also creates packaging trash. Also true. And you can see here that the kids had to explain their thinking and connect their thinking, and those are the lines and the arrows that you're looking at. Again, these are first graders, right? So we're going to move on to a next example, and we're going to just power through some examples here and ask you to help us think about them. So let's do the same thing with outdoor education. Choose a compass point. Outdoor education is right in the center. And what aspect of outdoor education do you think about, and what compass point is that related to? All right, social connects me to my culture. All right, we're still on chocolate, but now we're going to move into outdoor education. Move into outdoor education. What's a way that outdoor education is connected? Economy. Outdoor ed can be expensive. Well-being, building relationships, mental health, well-being, coming together, society, sharing nature, joy. See how we had two that were really similar? We had well-being as coming together, and we had society as sort of coming together and sharing joy. That's great, right? It's great. It's again our recognition of the interconnected nature of everything. Society, place-based learning. Excellent. All right, let's move on and look at how some kids are thinking about it. These are 14 to 16-year-olds. And you can just sort of take a look at the screen here and start to identify as well the way that these kids are understanding the value of using more outdoor learning. They're thinking about weather, they're thinking about there's less classroom heating because they're outside, right? They're thinking about more connections to nature. They're thinking, it could be distracting. That could not work for certain people, right? Encourages collaboration, and they're beginning to see the way that all of this is related, right? It isn't just a simple yes or no, we should go outdoors, right? There's all sorts of ways of thinking about it. This is the practice of embracing complexity and not being overwhelmed by it. Yeah, it's complex. No, there's never a perfectly right answer. There's always sort of this space where we are able to weigh and think about our priorities as a school, for example, or as people, and then look at the bigger picture and make some decisions. All right, we're going to keep on going and just sort of think about, here's a wholly different topic, right? Not environmental in any way, we don't think. Hosting a charity football match. But this is what's so critically important. When we connect the things that we do in all of our day-to-day activities with this conversation that we want to have about the impact of environmental education, about the critical importance of being connected in our world, when we're connecting it to all these other irrelevant things. Like I saw in the chat, people are working on cell phones and cell phone reuse. Let's put our cell phone in the center and let's think about the impacts. Let's think about what happens and understand it in that way. We're building our capacity to understand that the world is in systems, and it's critically important, and it directly connects to interests of students, right? And the minute we interest our students and this is their topic, they become the experts and the conversation becomes so much more rich. All right, so we're going to keep on going. And I'm going to sort of share that there is a practice here that we suggest, which is that you pick your focus, toss it in the center. You're going to add some ideas, and you can give direction to the kinds of ideas. You could say only add questions or only add facts that you've researched, right? Or just add your opinion. You can think about how you want to structure that, or you can leave it open like I have, right? And then we're going to ask students and learners to think, what's connected to what, and explain why. Explain why, explain why. And you're explaining to your peers, and you're explaining to your teacher, and you're clarifying your thinking in that practice of having to explain a connection. And then find things that are connected to lots of things. And this is critical. Find those hubs. And this becomes into the conversation about how do we teach students to have agency in this space. And so on the next slide, you'll see a student who's thinking about a really complicated topic, homelessness and subsidized housing, right? And they're trying to figure out what they can do. And so first off, to understand homelessness and government subsidized housing and to create a compass of this kind, you have to know a lot about what's happening. And you have to think about it from a perspective that you likely isn't the one that you always think about it. If I'm a service teacher and I'm asking a student to do something about homelessness, almost invariably, they just worry about them not having enough food or tents to sleep in, and they do a fundraising campaign from their parents, and now they take them some canned food, right? What we want to do is say there's so much more opportunity here. And so when these connections begin to happen, if I was working with a student, I'm going to say, what's connected to other things? And if you find that thing connected to other things, do you have agency there? And if you have agency there, then that's an opportunity to impact all of the other things it's connected to. Okay, Gitanjali. This is another quick example, but I also want to make sure that we have lots of time for questions at the end. So I think we'll do this one, and then we'll have some other options available for us to talk about at the end as we answer some questions from you. So this is a classic sort of the idea of taking students to a food bank or doing some work in the community. And oftentimes they kind of drag their feet, or they go and they do those 2 hours, and there's not a lot more there. And oftentimes they don't understand the power or the potential or the impact of that work. And so if you look at the way that this is unpacked here, what you're able to see is that students and educators, or educators and learners of any kind, can begin to understand the work of a food bank. And they can do that through interviewing people who work there, people who have services. They can start to understand it. And what you're going to see in that corner that's circled is the thing that's connected to everything else, that thing that drives impact in all these other factors of food justice, is those 300 volunteer hours. And when you begin to identify that I'm part of that and I'm doing all these things, it creates so much more power in the work that you're doing and so much more meaning for it. Gitanjali, will you just go down to the images of the bamboo architecture? Cool. So this was a architecture, adult architects, bamboo architects. They were in the jungles of Colombia, and they were tasked with designing a community learning center. And they were good architects and a little unclear and nervous about how they were going to get information about what made a valuable community learning center. And so I'm in the corner there, and I just did a quick 1, 2, 3. This is the compass. This is how you might think about it. Create interview questions for the community from these points of view, and use those to go out and get information. And then when you come back, we're going to pop them all on Post-its based on what you've learned. And then we're going to start to identify things that are priorities and things that we really need to consider that we might not have thought about. And then we can design this bamboo structure. So again, the tool can be used in all sorts of ways. It can be really agile in the field and in the classroom. All right, so we want you, and we're going to give you some follow-up materials. We're going to give you access to a free course, opportunities to learn with us in different sorts of ways. But we want you to just sort of see the depth of the way that you can use this tool. And if you're already seeing it, you can add it in the chat. If you're seeing, oh, maybe I could use it for this or do it in this way or those sorts of things, go ahead and add that in the chat. There's lots of ways that this tool can get adapted and can get used. And while you're doing that, let's see what I have here. Great. While you're doing that, I'm going to just speak a little bit more to the tool itself. You know, we're tasked as educators to be doing all of these kinds of things, this complexity thinking and analytical thinking and active learning and complex problem solving and creativity and cooperation and all sorts of things. And it's really hard to figure out how to fit all of that into the day when they're individual sort of line items. Systems thinking, we believe, is sort of that 2 for 20. You can do 20 different things at once that you have to do as an educator with a couple of tools, right? And so I see some of you are already seeing ways that you can do it as a pre and post activity to assess change and thinking for a 9-month program, as inquiry for student research. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So if you want to learn more, we are launching a introduction to the Compass tools, which is going to be the sustainability compass that you just learned, a tool called the Systems Iceberg. It's 3 2-hour cohorts, virtually online. There'll be people from the Americas. If you sign up for the Americas, there's a version in Spanish. There's a version all over the world. So that you can jump in and really use the tool. So if you're interested, we'll send some more information to you to do that. And we're going to move into your takeaway number 3.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, so I mean, there's so many things that we can gain when we help our learners map the system to paint how our environmental issues are so integral to our whole life. No matter what we're doing, they are connected. And once our learners see the system, one thing that's really important for agency is to make sure that we are being intentional and helping them see where change is possible. What can they actually do? And taking action doesn't just happen, it happens through design and intention and how we as educators shape our sessions. So one thing that we want to share, and this will be mentioned in that workshop series Nicole just said is going to be happening. One thing we want to share to help you use the compass and really move to that action piece is this tool called the Spheres of Influence model. Often there's multiple leverage points. There's multiple things that we can change to make a difference. And this frame helps us to understand that we and our learners, we're all part of different levels and scales of systems. So meaningful action can look different at these different levels. On the smallest scale, there's what we can control, which is about us as individuals, our personal choices, our personal actions and habits. But then as we go out broader, there are all these things we can influence, like our friends and our family, the community we're part of, our local policy, local institutions. And then as it moves further and further away from us, depending on who we are as a person, our influence lessens and it becomes more something we're concerned about. And that might be perhaps global issues or policies beyond our ability to really influence. So this frame is really valuable because it does a couple of really great things. One, it helps to prevent a sense of helplessness. A problem doesn't have to be too big. There's always something that can be done. And 2, it also balances out a sense of naivete that every action one individual takes is going to change the entire system. So it can be really helpful for us as we're helping our learners figure out what's their entry point for change once they find those hubs. I saw in the chat some people were wondering what the H was in path. It's finding a hub, finding a really interconnected piece of the system where you can channel your energy to make a difference, those leverage points, so to speak. So to show you what we're talking about, I'm going to pull up this example of a compass for the issue of marine microplastics, similar to the diagram I showed you earlier. And I want to ask you in the chat, as you're looking at this, if your learners created this map, they are understanding the interconnected economic and social well-being and nature systems involved in marine microplastics. Which of these circles would you pick as a leverage point, as something that you would try to target with action to change? Put in the chat whichever bubble stands out for you. Where would you focus your energy? And if you can, think about your sphere of influence. What's something that you think would be in the sphere of influence for your learners to target? Consumerism, okay. All of them, but water quality, right? Lots of these can be things we target. The idea is to pick something that's really relevant and in our ability to impact. So I'm seeing things about anxiety, waste management, convenience culture. Yeah, there's lots of different ideas here. Well, let's take a look at what some students actually did pick when they did a compass on this issue. This is a video from a conference that was where I am actually in Texas. It was in Houston a couple of years ago. And these students made a compass and they're going to explain to you what they chose to focus on.
Hi, my name is Nicole. I study in China, and we have chosen to focus on the target 14.1, reducing marine pollution of all kinds. Now, there are four aspects of it: nature, economy, society, and well-being.
Yeah, we specifically, hi, my name is Renat and I'm from Egypt. We specifically chose to focus on the issue of microplastics, and basically the main cause is that there's an increase in population, and that means there's an increase for products with microplastics, and so companies will produce more of that, and that in turn will harm the climate. That will specifically harm the seas and the oceans, so it will harm marine life and the climate, and then when people consume these fish and marine life, they will end up with long-term health issues and other things that my friend will keep talking about.
Now, toxic marine animals will affect the population who consumes them, and also influences the mortality rates. Other than that, it also affects several well-being aspects of it, such as toxic effects when consumed in large quantities, and stress about eating clean.
And then maybe like a couple solutions with that, we would encourage people to like stop consuming products that have microplastics, and that in turn will also encourage companies to stop producing these, which will solve most of these issues. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you can see that ultimately, after mapping this, these students decided if we're going to take action, we want to focus in on the consumer demand for single-use plastics. And that's going to change the bigger system because it will change the demand for businesses to be producing this. Now, this is where it's really intentional on our end as environmental educators to keep going. So in your experience, running your programs, running your lessons, when you're designing your learning, do you end with an issue? Do you end with identifying where they can take action? Or do you end with an action step that they're actually doing? So once you've mapped the system and you have them understanding it, how do you actually make sure that they are taking action? Can you use this sphere of influence model, and can you use this compass to help come up with some action steps that your learners can actually do to practice their actual skills as change agents? And if you can you even give them a choice? So in whatever you're designing, there's a bunch of ideas on this slide. Are you actually building in that time intentionally for them to do something? If you're taking a look at this slide right here, as I'm talking through it, I would love to see in the chat, which type of project would you choose to do with your students and build into your program? There's all these different ways you can build in work that's actually based in action: service learning, volunteer work, advocacy, social innovation and designing, political involvement, philanthropy, and then community engaged research, doing things with the community. So as you as an environmental educator are reflecting on your program and bringing in systems and bringing in leverage points, that agency comes from not just leaving the issue out there, bring it down into this idea of what's the action that we can take together or that you can take. Let me actually give you a specific call to action and not something general. Because when we identify those leverage points and we think about what's the action we can take, we're helping to make sure that we are reiterating to our learners, this isn't an abstract issue. We've mapped what's going on, and here's how you are connected to it. You can locate a place where you can actually take action and you can have an impact. And that connection is what builds that sense of agency and engagement. So just as a quick recap of how this can work together, if we want to go from awareness to agency, we want to shift from just thinking about planning what learners are going to know to what they're going to be able to do. We want to not just describe a problem, we want to explore the causes of it with systems thinking, so we can not just identify underlying systems, but find leverage points for action. And in our projects and our learning experiences we design, have not a general call to action, but something specific that they can be working on. So with all of that, let's come back and pull it all together.
Yeah. So here we go. We've shared sort of the three takeaways. We hope that you are taking something that you can really actively use from this workshop. We are going to be sending you information in order to support you to use these tools as quickly as possible. And the Compass Education website has a mountain of resources so that you can really begin to use this work. Both Gitanjali and I are available for questions, and we'll share our information at the end. You can please reach out anytime, and there's multiple kinds of options and opportunities to connect. I think ultimately when we look at this work, we need to recognize and understand in our role that systems thinking is connected to everything that we do in education today, that we need to move from a practice of seeing it as something else or something extra to an opportunity for greater education and integration in everything that we do all the time. So I kind of love this quote as a way to remind us of this important work. And I want to acknowledge and thank all of you for doing this important work in the world. We need you, and we need more of you, and we need to become stronger as a system. So thank you for being here on this workshop with us and joining us. And feel free to reach out. That is a legitimate offer to reach out anytime to either of us. And I think we're going to take some questions. We have a few minutes left, and so we're happy to answer any questions that we can.
Nicole and Gitanjali, thank you so much. That was fantastic. So much to think about, and we do have quite a few comments. And Masoom, I think you were from India. I think you asked 5 really great questions. So I'm just going to give you a couple here. One is, how do you balance the compass when there's an unequal pull in different directions? And then we also had a question related to that. Well, not exactly related, but how do you use this in national and international systems that push against the environment at every turn? So try those, and we have some more coming in here.
Okay, I'm going to answer the last one, and Gitanjali, I'll throw you the first one. When we're thinking about big systems and we're thinking about the pushback on some of this work that we're doing, and especially when we're working with students, one of the ways that I think we can begin to bring ourselves together is by thinking about things that we value collectively, and using the compass as a way to unpack the things that we value, and then to begin to understand that the things that we value are interconnected with the environment that we care about. So very often in schools, when it might be politically incorrect to say the word sustainability, I just put the school mission in the center. Let's unpack the school mission. And invariably, you're going to have all sorts of things that are related to sustainability. Let's put students who thrive, children who thrive in the center. And invariably, it's going to touch everything that we already care about.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Nicole. And I think along similar lines of trying to reimagine how we approach a topic, if we're looking at a compass and we realize it's really unbalanced, maybe all of our ideas are being really dominated by an economic perspective or a nature perspective. And let's be honest, a lot of us have our own subjective experiences, our places we lean to more, or the people we're working with might really have their strong opinions. That's life. Let's reframe it. Let's bring curiosity to the table and ask, why is this one compass point so empty? Whose perspective is missing? Who do we need to have here as a voice? This is a really great way for bringing in environmental justice, right? Whose voice is missing here? What perhaps human or animal or environmental perspective is missing here? So when you see that lack of balance, which is likely going to happen, how do you ask questions and do research or community engagement or find ways to fill in that gap and use it as a real learning opportunity?
Ooh, great answers, you two. Couple more questions. Are you ready? We just have a few more minutes. I'll give you two questions. One is, how do you evaluate this Compass tool? What are some suggestions for that? And how is this different from the sustainability platform that so many people use? Well-being is added, but everything else is on a basic sustainability platform. So I'll let you end with those and any final words you have for everyone.
I think you're the best one there, Gitanjali. Go for it.
I'll let you tackle the well-being because I know that's your favorite thing, Nicole, and I'll speak to the assessment piece and mention, first of all, there are lots of lesson plans and examples on the Compass Education website. So my brief answer, there's a lot more on the website you can look at. But in general, this tool can be used for everything from framing the perspectives you want included in essays or presentations to helping to think about how you're going to be doing observation notes. I used this with ninth grade geography students to do a quality of life investigation where they had to collect data to think about quality of life from all different perspectives. I've seen this used for green architecture challenges, for analyzing math data, trying to figure out how it's relevant to the real world. So whatever assessments you're already doing, whatever type of assessment work you do, pull this in to help deepen and flesh out the conversation. So Nicole, well-being, why is it different?
Yeah, sure. I do feel passionate because I think our standard sort of people, profit, and planet, right, is we aren't thinking of individuals. We aren't contextualizing people in the relationships and the individuals that we have with us, near us, and next to us. We're suggesting for a moment that people are just all people. And the reality is that's never the case. The reality is that individual within your system, the relationship that gets created between the thing that you care about and the outcome that we see in the world is critically important, maybe the most important, right? And so what I think is really powerful here is this ability to step into the shoes of different kinds of people as we think about this work. And then we can craft and create solutions that are contextually and appropriate and relevant to our world and the people that we are in relationship with. And I think this is a critical element of understanding systems and systems thinking and the kinds of outcomes that we want to have.
Thank you both so much. We could go on for a couple more hours, I think, but I hope everyone signs up for the workshop and continues to look in the website for all the tools and thinking that you both have put together. It's incredible, and it helps us all think about the systems piece, the agency piece, the well-being piece. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing this with all of us. You are fantastic. And I am going to turn this over to Anne for a few final comments of some upcoming events, but thanks again to our wonderful speakers.
Thanks again, Nicole and Gitanjali. So much deep thinking and follow-ups that we will continue the conversation. As Judy mentioned, I am just going to take the next minute or two to close us out with a few announcements from NAAE. The first one is this shout out for EE Pro. Many of you in the chat are already asking for the slides and the notes, the chat, the recording. We will be sharing all of that on EE Pro. If you found this webinar, that means you know exactly where EE Pro is. So stay tuned for that in the next couple of days. And then these next two slides show some opportunities for some in-person connections that we've got on deck this year. The first one is NAAE's annual conference. We're going to be in person this year in Portland, Oregon, October 6th and 7th for the research symposium and October 6th and 9th for the regular conference. The call for presentations is now open and those are due April 10th. One more in-person conference that is brought to you by our friends at the Natural Start Alliance. This conference is all for our early childhood educators. We're going to be in Texas with you, Gitanjali, but in San Antonio, the Nature-Based Early Learning Conference. Registration is open now. You can learn more looking at these links. And I'm going to go ahead and drop some of those links in the chat now, or you can find out more. And on deck, we have one more webinar coming up at the end of April When Values Collide, Deliberating Environmental Issues with Youth and Adults. We have two fantastic speakers joining us from the National Issues Forum Institute, and they're going to be talking about how we can use deliberation as a tool to talk through some complicated conversations that we have. So if you ever find yourself as an educator talking about some or debating about some polarizing issues, we're going to roll out how you can use deliberation as a way to get to more nuance and through values and more deeper, meaningful discussion. And so that's coming up April 23rd. And then last announcement, we do have our 30 under 30 class of 2026. We are accepting nominations now just until next week. So if you know somebody, or maybe you yourself are somebody under 30 years of age doing some pretty cool things around the world related to environmental education and all the forms that it can take, we would love to get those nominations. Get them in by next week, March 31st. And then I will leave you with one final ask. We would love to hear from you about what you thought about our webinar today. Let us know too if there's anything bubbling up for you in terms of other topics, ideas. We're always looking out for new content and speakers for future webinars. So take a look, take a picture of that QR code that'll take you straight to an evaluation. And that's it. That's all I've got. Thanks again, Nicole, Gitanjali, Judy, and all of you for joining us. We will be seeing you sometime soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Good job, y'all.
Bye.
Great job.
Thank you. Thanks for
Do you
your
know what I'm
support.
most disappointed in? Is when I'm the host, I can't show reactions. The reaction
Oh,
button is gone. It didn't work, but thank you. That was fantastic.
yeah, really nice
Thank
job,
you.
y'all.
And I keep seeing things there that we just want to really emphasize in some of the work that we're doing, even more so. So thank you so much. And it's great to see you again, Tajali, and to meet you, Nicole, and get a sense of, like this team you have. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're super excited to have been able to partner with you in this way. And we haven't done that much work in the States. And so to begin to see this energy moving, even at this time in the world and in the US
We need you. We
is
need you.
needed and exciting. And, we're super glad to be part of it.
Well,
Yeah.
have a great rest of your day, and just thanks again for all you do. And Anne, thank you so much. Great closing.
All right,
Yeah,
y'all.
thank you, Anne.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.